Hello, fellow gastronomes, and welcome to Dirty Belly, where we take you on a journey as your food goes from dirt to your belly. I'm your host, a dad who loves to eat and grow, Jeff Sims. I'm here today with our resident culinarian, Matthew Gaddis.
Hey y'all, that's me. I'm a culinarian. That's what one person in this world calls me.
I had to use a dictionary or a thesaurus to find a good way to say chef. So culinarian, what we're going with. Thank you, Rockets, the thesaurus. And a special shout out to our producer, Will Gray, who is out there floating in the ether somewhere.
He's discovered that you know how they said that there was you enter a black hole and there's a white hole on the other side, like a quantum superpositioning thing. Well, he kind of found out that that's not the thing. So he's past the event horizon at this point. Our last communication is literally lasting forever. So love you, buddy. Hope you get out from the infinite suck.
Now, once you go into a black hole, you never come back. He's stuck in the ether forever.
Damn.
He's like the quantum leap, Ziggy or whatever. The dude that, not Ziggy. And nobody else can see him but us. We know he's out there.
Oh, that's fun. I like that.
What's the best thing you ate this week, Matt?
Oh, the best thing I ate this week. I actually had I had a lot of really good meals. I cooked a lot of really fun stuff, but I would be remiss if I did not mention my 420 festivities. Went out on the town and went to a food truck called Brave Idiot here in Nashville. It's next to No Quarter in East Nashville on Main Street. They do amazing smash burgers, really great hot chicken. Uh, but they had a 420 special burger, and walk with me here because this is insanity. It was a 6-ounce smash burger, Bear Creek beef patty, American cheese, a Nashville hot spiced crispy hash brown disc, two big pasta shells stuffed with more mac and cheese and deep fried, thrown on that burger, caramelized onions, green onions, and a bucket of regret. It was, oh my God, it was insane. Like, I got a picture of it, but only after like 4 bites in because I was starving and could not help myself. But that burger was insane. And straight up quality of the burger, I cannot wait to go back, not just for a novelty act. Like, it was one of the better burgers I have ever had.
It looks good, even with a bite taken out of it.
Yeah, it was a big mess. And then later in the evening had one of my favorite home just super high treat yourself kind of things. Did a Frito chili pie with flaming hot Fritos, some Skyline chili, which was controversial, uh liquid nacho cheese, scallions, and if I'm not mistaken, the picture that I sent has a mini donut on there. That's you know, sometimes you got to go hard in the paint.
I've never heard of nachos with a donut, to be honest.
Well, me either. It wasn't my idea, but I quickly accepted it.
Much like the early colonial settlers in America quickly accepted corn when they came to America, which brings us to our
There he is.
subject. There's our segue, guys.
There he is.
I hope you like that segue. Cornbread. Mama loves
Cornbread.
cornbread. Daddy loves cornbread. Will loves cornbread. Matt loves cornbread. So that's what we're talking about today. So we'll start out with, what is cornbread? First question, Matt. Do tortillas count?
You know, I'm actually surprised you brought this up so early because I had it as a question to ask you. Uh, in the technical sense, I do believe corn tortillas are a cornbread because it is literally a bread product made out of corn. If you're taking the spiritual idea of cornbread, no, it's a tortilla. But if we're getting technical, then yes, absolutely.
It is a cornbread because tortillas are a form of bread. They're flatbreads. Now, what if you ask somebody in the South in Tennessee, are they cornbread? They're going to most of the time say no because we have a very specific idea of what cornbread is here. But any batter bread made with cornmeal is technically a cornbread. So there you go. Um, the history of cornbread, I'm going to jump right into this because I love history. So we're going to do it first on this one.
Let's go.
A lot of people say as American as apple pie, right? Everybody's heard that. But really, I feel like they should say as American as corn because really there's nothing more American than corn. Okay. Corn came from America. Um, Probably South America, actually, maybe Mexico. Originally, like, where did it first grow? We know that people were eating it probably as early as 5000 BC in the Americas. There's no record of corn anywhere else in the world before colonists came to America. So we know that it came
Really?
from North and South America. We know that it was first domesticated in Mexico around 4000 BC. Now, that's when people first started saving the seeds and growing it. Like a lot of food stuff, cornbread has a disputed origin. People aren't really sure where the first cornbreads were made.
Where they first breaded the corn.
And of course, we're talking about what we talked about: batter bread made with cornmeal, ground up corn. So, definitely eaten by the Olmecs, Aztecs, and Mayans, if that's what we're talking about. Now, if you want to get more atypical for what Americans modernly think of as cornbread, some people claim it was first eaten by the Native American tribes of the Southwest, uh, maybe 2,000 years ago. Some people claim that it was first created by European settlers when they came to the South and met Indians and learned how to grow corn. There's really not a lot of evidence one way or the other to substantiate where our version of cornbread started.
So when you say met Indians, like are we specifically talking about like Native American tribes, or are we talking about
Yes, I shouldn't say
maybe?
Indians because that's not politically correct anymore because
Oh,
Indians
no, I
are
wasn't
from the
calling you out on
country of
that.
India, but
I didn't know if whether it was maybe Native American tribes or perhaps immigrants from Mexico and Central America that had that influence.
I think what we're talking about is colonial settlers meeting Native Americans and
Gotcha.
learning how to grow corn, and then eventually turning that in and seeing how they turned it into cornmeal to use from their making of their breads and making something a little bit closer to what we would think of as cornbread today. Um, it's probably the 1800s before you really start to see anything that you would look at and say, "Oh, that's cornbread." Um, it was really a product of necessity in the South, where wheat has historically been difficult to grow because of the climate. It gets moldy, where corn is a much more hardy crop, so it does better in our weather here.
We're hitting a theme here. A lot of Southern food culture. It's born of necessity, not indulgence.
Yeah, well, you're hungry, right? I mean, when you're hungry, you'll eat about anything, right? Even something new you haven't tried before, right? And early Southern settlers did the same thing, and they saw Native Americans making types of bread out of cornmeal, and they said, "Let's try that." And they started to make it kind of their own way and tried to make it taste better, right? More palatable to what they like to eat. First, they started adding eggs, buttermilk, oil, and hog fat to their recipes to add more flavor. Um,
Shout out hog fat.
it's difficult really to recreate those early cornbreads because a lot of our processes have changed since then. For example, in the early 1900s, the steel roller mill was invented, which dramatically changed the output of cornmeal. It made it a much more fine flour type consistency. Now, nowadays, you can buy more traditional style cornmeals, but for a long time, everything was steel milled. So, what we think of as modern cornmeal is much finer, much less sweet, and really necessitates the addition of sugar and leaveners such as baking soda and baking powder to really create a good bread compared to what they were using back in the old days, where they would a lot of times ground it with stone by hand sometimes.
Yeah, there's some really great, just little fun historical anecdote here, especially if you're in the southern region around Tennessee. There's out in East Tennessee, especially the Smoky Mountain National Park. There's some really interesting places you can go and see. One still operational, but a lot of old stone mills, ones that have been abandoned for generations and generations. But just to see those heavy pieces of stone and what they were going through just to make their crops work for them is really impressive.
Yeah, we're very fortunate to live in the modern era where food is so easy to procure for us because it wasn't that many hundred years ago that how to get yourself fed was your day-to-day life every day, right? And it was hard work. And now when we
And
start to
now we
talk
get
about,
to go to a store where they put mac and cheese on a burger, and
oh
it's fun.
yeah, I mean you can go to the store and buy pre-ground cornmeal to make your cornbread, $5 for a bag, which used to be cheaper than that, but uh, and instead of having to grow the corn, dry it, and then grind it yourself, either using a stone mill with horsepower or maybe even by hand if you weren't rich enough to have that kind of facility available to you.
Or water power. That was the reason for a lot of like water mills to keep that wheel
Yeah.
turning. That would power your grindstone, and you could just turn it off at the end of the day, and the water would fall. But throughout the day, that water is turning the wheel, which in turn turns the grindstone, which can be upwards of a ton of rock that you somehow got into place, and that's how that went down. Way to end the
Aliens.
sentence.
That's why you see a lot, and that the power of water is why you see most ancient civilizations built alongside rivers, right? Because that power, constantly having that power, really made life a lot easier
Yeah.
on people.
But
Now, when
also, yeah, also aliens. Yeah, for sure.
we start to look at the cultivation of corn, I said earlier that American is corn, and it's true because corn is the number one crop grown in the United States of America. The 1/3 of what we grow is used for animal feed, 1/3 for ethanol, and 1/3 for human consumption. A lot of that is exported around the world. We export our largest share of corn to China, uh, who is actually the second largest producer of corn in the world. Um,
Hmm.
there are 80 million acres of land exclusively dedicated to corn cultivation in the United States. That's a lot of
Good
land.
God.
Yep. We are the world's leading producer of corn. We produced over 382 million tons of corn in 2021, which is 30% of the world's production. And as I said earlier, China's pretty distant second at about 20% of the world's production of corn. The state of Iowa, which is our number one corn producer, grows 3 times as much corn as the entire country of Mexico.
I'm surprised to hear Iowa is number one. JJ in the chat here. I grew up in Indiana, and that was our thing was corn production. So I would have guessed Indiana.
I believe Indiana's third on the list, so I think it's Iowa, Illinois, Indiana. So imagine how much, if you grew up in Indiana and you know how much corn they grow in Indiana, imagine how much corn has to be grown in Iowa to be number one by a pretty significant margin. Um, Now, if you want to grow corn yourself, you're going to need a lot of land. It's it's not something that's easily grown in a home garden because they pollinate off of each other. So you need to grow. Farmers say you want at least 4 rows, right? So and that takes up a lot of space in a home garden.
Yeah.
It's not a plant that grows well in rural, I mean, urban gardens, right? You really need to be in a rural setting. You're going to want a lot of land to really grow a significant corn crop.
Well,
If
we've
you're going to,
we've grown corn here at the house. It is possible. We had probably talking in feet here, probably a 12-foot by 5-foot bed. But yeah, we had 3 or 4 rows, and
yeah,
we've only been successful 1 year. This is all Shaggy. Shout out to him. But yeah, I mean, 1 year it was incredible. Like it was just to watch it happen on such a small plot of land in our front yard in East Nashville. And yeah, meanwhile, a few houses down, they're growing corn that takes up their entire front yard, and it grows to the roof. It's insane.
yeah. The more that you grow, the higher likelihood of your success because they do pollinate off each other. Most vegetables are actually self-pollinators. A lot of people don't know that the flowers pollinate themselves, but corn actually, you need another stalk of corn next to this one, and the wind has to blow just right, or the bee has to go from one to the other to get them to pollinate, which is why large cornfields produce a lot better than a small plot. And if you are having trouble growing corn, either you're not growing enough, or the most likely culprit is nitrogen, right? Because it is a huge nitrogen feeder. Most corn crops have to be fed multiple times a year with nitrogen fertilizer. If you're a commercial farmer, you will rotate corn and beans because beans actually put nitrogen back into the soil, which can save you money on your nitrogen fertilizer the next year. If you do grow corn in the same field every year and you don't add a ton of nitrogen to your soil, you're going to quit having output. It's not going to grow. And it's a big one that needs either tons of fertilizer or a really good crop rotation. It does use a lot of water as well. It's a very tall crop, very big plant, and each stalk produces a lot of ears, which themselves carry a lot of water. So it's a hot weather crop, which is why you'll see it. It's usually one of the last that'll show up at your farmer's market. You'll even see the big tomatoes before you start seeing corn show up.
Oh yeah.
It's got a very long growth cycle, and it really likes the hot weather. So you're not going to be planting it in the spring. In Tennessee, corn farmers are just now starting to plant in late April, early May. If you're buying it commercially, if you're buying it from anybody that's growing it commercially at your farmer's market or at your grocery store, it will have been treated with pesticides. And herbicides. I can almost guarantee that. Almost 100% of the corn that's produced in America has been treated with Roundup at some point. The ground is Rounduped beforehand. So it's something to keep in mind. A lot of people like to stay away from that kind of stuff, but if you like corn, you're probably not going to. It's necessary for commercial corn production. And specifically, since we're talking about cornbread, we're going to talk about cornmeal. If you want to make cornmeal, you have to dry your corn first, and it's actually dry on the stalk. So, if you're looking for a field that produces cornmeal, eventually you're going to see one that well into the fall, these stalks are still going to be standing up, and then they'll come and harvest it all.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's my spiel. That's the cultivation and history of corn and cornmeal. I hope you enjoyed it.
It definitely brought. I was thinking of memories of being a kid again, talking about being in Indiana and the cornfield staying up for a long time, and boy, we would get in trouble because we'd go play around in the farmers' cornfields that were next to my neighborhood, and there's all sorts of risks there. Like, number one, you're on private property. You probably shouldn't be stealing ears of corn, but I'm not worried about that. But we're tiny little kids in giant stalks of corn. So if they decide to put a giant piece of machinery through there sometime in the fall, we're just going to get chopped up. You don't know we're out there.
We got some people in the chat talking about the Sledge It Real Good says the fourth ingredient in growing corn is Monsanto, which brings up a good point that it is one of the most crossbred and cultivated crops in the world, really. I mean, it's right up there with tomatoes, wheat, stuff like that, that every year people are trying to create new breeds. They're trying to genetically modify it to create higher yields and better flavor. And yeah, so nowadays, any kind of corn that you eat has been heavily modified, either through cross-pollination of different breeds or now even genetically modification. And
yeah, that brings me to a point of like a lot of crops and like a lot of products these days, there's an interesting turn back to the old school, to heirloom varieties. I was one brand that I've used a lot in my restaurants is Anson Mills. It's a historic Southern company. Their big flagship product is Carolina Gold rice, called Carolina Gold because that was a big cash crop back in the day. But they also deal in heirloom grits and cornmeal. Specifically, their Jimmy Red cornmeal is fantastic, and that's a company that is very intentionally kind of shaking off the GMOs and the modifications and everything. Their product is expensive, but it's because they're doing the work to avoid kind of what we think of in like modern commodity farming with pesticides and things like that. Like their stuff is all natural. And yeah, like I said, you're gonna pay through the nose for it, but it's interesting, and I always love it when a company comes out here and gets back to the roots of a product and like seed preservation and grain preservation.
And I like that you brought that up because that even in the gardening world, that is such a huge movement right now into heirloom varieties, especially in tomatoes. You see it in corn, you see it in beans. People want stuff that's different, more authentic to historical foods, which is funny because for the longest time, it was the opposite. People didn't want heirloom breeds. And this is something I've learned when I've studied tomatoes a lot, is that for the longest time, they were trying to cultivate the most round, consistent tomato they could because people were canning them at home and that's what people wanted, right? But now that we have all this convenience and in a way privilege to be able to walk down to the store and buy tomatoes, canned tomato sauce, all the, you know what I mean, all the staples that you need, now people want more variety, right? They're like, oh, I like an ugly tomato because it tastes a little bit better or it's different, right? It looks cool, right? But 100 years ago people would have said, I don't want to grow that because it's hard to can, right? Or it's hard to preserve for my own purposes. But
Yeah.
now we've got to the point where now we're trying to undo all the hard work that people have done in before, and a lot of the reason that the heirloom varieties are more expensive when you buy them is because they're harder to grow. You get lower yields, and a lot of times they're less resistant to pests. All the stuff that people have bred and GMO'd stuff to be makes it easier and cheaper to grow this stuff, right? And
Thomas Keller said it best. We do it the hard way because it's the right way.
yeah, but there's a price involved with it. It's going to cost you more for those type of ingredients. Matt, what do you got for us today on cornbread?
Oh, on cornbread. One thing that immediately came to mind was my history with cooking cornbread, which is a shallow well. I've never really come up with a cornbread recipe other than asking Chef Google and just firing from the hip.
Don't worry, I got you later. I got you later in the episode. I'm gonna give you an incredible cornbread recipe.
God, I'm ready for it. But one thing I have done for a restaurant in the past was we kind of determined we wanted to have cornbread at this restaurant. The restaurant I've mentioned them before, Field and Main up in Virginia. If you're in the Virginia area, please go find them. But we wanted to have cornbread on the menu, but it was such a polarizing subject of like what style and how moist and what flavors. So what I did was do a cornbread pudding, which I found was a really fun thing to do. So you take uh, basically an anglaise, like you're going to get ready to make ice cream, and then steep that with roasted, like local, fresh, sweet corn. Let that steep for hours. Then you use that and eggs as your base with stale breadcrumbs, preferably a brioche for me, uh, and let it sit like a bread pudding. Then we would portion that into cast iron and cook it. We ended up cooking it in the oven just because it became very popular, but we started cooking it over the hearth fire. So you had this smoky, open flame cast iron cornbread, but it was much more bread pudding, and it was moist, and it was
That
it
sounds
was
fantastic.
dude. I was actually I might have some plans to go up there before long, and I was looking at their menu. That is one of two dishes that has been on the menu since opening day, like 6 years ago. Like it is amazing. And
It
it's
reminds me. It reminds me of a recipe I used to make Southern spoon bread, where you take cream and cornmeal and steep that for you almost boil it and then let it cool and then temper in some egg yolks and then bake that off. And it's almost like a pudding more than a
Yeah.
cornbread, but it's very savory where yours sounds a lot more sweet. So
Yeah, mine's definitely very sweet. We took a local maple syrup and made a compound butter, and so it was essentially a dessert, but it's a southern restaurant, so who cares? You can eat dessert for every course.
yeah, I mean we all have diabetes down here. It's fine.
And there's a lot of other variations too. I know in our own chat earlier, Jeff, you shared a bunch of pictures, and there's variations. There's hoe cakes, Johnny cakes,
Oh yeah.
corn pone, the hot water cornbread. One thing that I grew up with, and JJ, if you got some Indiana knowledge, you're going to know about this. Mush, fried mush. So mush is made from runoff cornmeal liquid that is compressed with a little bit of flour, uh, and you have to let it set up, and then you griddle it, and it comes out crispy on the outside and almost like a cheesecake texture on the inside from the cornmeal and the buttermilk. And you usually dress it with like a little salt and maple syrup. I have never seen it outside of the Midwest. Like nobody down here knows about fried mush. It's really fun. It's generally for octogenarian farmers, but if you can get past that, it's really fun.
Well, cornmeal mush actually was a big staple during the Great Depression because it was so cheap. And if you were really poor in the Great Depression, a lot of times you would have cornmeal 3 meals a day. You would start out with like a bowl of almost porridge, and then they would turn that into some of that later in the day into some sort of like fried polenta cake, and then they'd re-prepare it another way for dinner. And cornmeal mush. It's you're right. It's a big thing. Speaking of the types of cornbread, I'm going to go through that real quick. This is where you see all the dispute about cornbread because everybody's got their favorite type, right? And if we ever do have another civil war, it's probably going to be over cornbread. I'm just saying. We personally here and on this show are from the South, so Southern style cornbread is probably what we're most used to growing up.
Cast iron,
But
baby.
yeah, you're gonna have to cook it in cast iron. And what most people are thinking of, I don't know. There's two different types, right? There's hot water cornbread, okay, and that's northern style cornbread that's on the thing right now. That is going to be made with. You're going to add flour to your cornmeal. You're going to add sugar or some sort of sweetener like honey, and there's going to be a lot of eggs in it. We've got hot water cornbread on the southern style. You're going to make a batter using boiling hot water, and then you're going to deep fry it. There's a really hard crust on the outside and a nice creamy, soft interior. You see this a lot at meat and threes in the South. I feel like it's a big part of Black culture because I see it at a lot of Black-owned meat and threes. Corn pone is the other type of Southern cornbread. This is going to be cooked in some sort of round pan. In my family, it was a cast iron skillet that was heated up in the oven. You're going to put some oil in the pan. You're going to have a pretty thick batter. Traditionally, it would be cooked in fat over an open flame, some kind of hog fat. My family, we use bacon grease. We would just bake ours in the oven because we don't have an open flame anymore. It's not a thing people do.
Yeah, bacon grease is the move, though. This is the way.
It adds a lot of flavor. You're gonna have to put something on the pan to keep it from sticking, right? And why not do something? Why not be as unhealthy as possible, right? Why not put literal animal fat, salty animal fat in there to really season it up? Traditionally, corn pone is eggless, okay, and this is a big difference between northern and southern style. Northern style will have a lot of egg in it, and also you traditionally don't put sugar in these. Some people put a little sugar, but nothing like you'll see with northern cornbread. A lot of times, northern cornbread is sweet, right? And when I cook for people cornbread, my personal recipe is a northern style. If I'm cooking for people that I don't know well, but I'm cooking for my family, I cook southern style. So the recipe I'm going to give you guys in a little bit is a northern style recipe. There's Johnny cakes, or as my mom calls them, hoe cakes. These are going to be Traditionally, just water, a little bacon fat, maybe a little seasoning, and cornmeal, and you're gonna kind of pan fry those, almost like a little thicker tortilla kind of thing. You don't press it like a tortilla. You'll see this served a lot with dishes like red beans and rice and stuff like that. But Brunswick stew a lot of times will come with hoe cakes. One thing that most people don't think of as cornbread that is actually cornbread is hush puppies.
Yep. Oh yeah.
And you'll put sugar in there. You'll put onions in your hush puppies.
God, I love a hush puppy. Oh,
I do
man.
too. Thank you, Matt. Man, I
Just
love it
little
when we
crispy
agree.
nuggets. God.
Matt is Will's out there in the ether shaking his head. I think we blew his mind. He's like, "That is not cornbread." Yes, it is. Okay, that's
This is where we disassociate with Will completely. I didn't know you're not down with hush puppies. Oh my God.
And then of course he's really going to be upset now. He's going to be screaming into the void. The corn tortilla.
It's a cornbread. Sorry, everybody.
For a corn tortilla, you're going to want to get a tortilla press. You're going to want to press it as thin as possible. You're going to have a very thick batter. You're going to press it really thin. You're going to pan fry it somehow or over an open flame. A lot of times they would use brick ovens to cook theirs.
Well, while we're talking about regional cornbreads, shout out to Kev Moses, who is, I don't believe, here with us right now, but helped me with a little bit of research. There's a modern phenomenon of cornbread becoming international because it was like you said, it's a very American invention, but it's starting to move its way around. Obviously, corn cultivation came from Mexico and the South originally, but now they've got their pan de elote, which is a southern U.S. style cornbread that they're getting into. Another place that's blowing up, is in the southern Basque region of France, which seems kind of like a random jump, but southern France, very close to Spain, and Spain did a lot of colonization in Central and North America. So it's an easy jump there. So the French are now getting on board, and God help us when the French figure out cornbread, because
it doesn't seem weird to me because the French will take anything food and make it better. So it's like corn tastes good. I'm surprised it's taken them this long to get on board. So
yeah.
They're a little late to the party, but that's okay because I'm excited too. We all know what the French can do. Do you have anything else you want to talk about cornbread wise before I jump into my best cornbread recipe that you've ever had, way better than Will Gray's?
Well, the recipe that you have that's definitely better than Will's, and we're totally not friends anymore. This is never going to go forward again. Sorry. Thanks everyone for the last episode. One thing that was super fascinating to find was in South Pittsburgh, Tennessee, at the home base of Lodge Cast Iron. There's the National Cornbread Festival. So the requirements of competing in the festival are you have to use 1 cup of Martha White brand cornbread mix, and you have to cook in a Lodge cast iron vessel. Those are the only requirements. So a lot like some of the other things we've talked about on this show, that kind of shows the infinite possibilities of cornbread. I believe last year's winner was a cornbread pizza. So it's something that you really need to open your mind about. Yeah. Get your mind around that. A cast iron cornbread pizza. Yeah. So that's a really cool event. If you find yourself in the neighborhood of South Pittsburgh, Tennessee,
I'm going to.
Yeah. They open up for the festival. They open up the foundries so you can watch the cast iron being made, which is not something that's open all the time. So it's a really cool event, and I like. Lodge cast iron, for those in the know, that's kind of the gold standard for American cast iron.
It's the American Le Creuset. Come on.
It is. It's Le Creuset on a budget, and it's just as good. Damn it! I don't need to pay $180 for a Dutch oven.
Yeah, I can make those
Dutch
for
oven
free
myself. Damn it!
Yes. Yes.
And. Oh yeah, real quick here, just a little fun bit. So via the website Taste Atlas, stumbled upon this last night, and it's the top 10 cornbread top 10 restaurants you can get cornbread in the U.S. right now, and it's a very bougie list, but it's kind of fascinating. Number one would be Husk in Charleston. That was one of Sean Brock's flagships. He is no longer associated with Husk, but they're still carrying the torch of Southern food. Number two, Jacques Imo in New Orleans. Number three, Shirley Mays in Louisville. Number four, Olami in Austin. Number five, finally getting out of the South, is Bandera in Chicago. And then 6 through 10 doesn't matter. The funny part of it is 3 of those final spots belong to Roscoe's in Los Angeles. 3 different Roscoe's locations got best cornbread on the top 10 list.
Wow.
So I've never been out to the West Coast, at least the Southern West Coast, but now I have a new destination, because if they got 3 of the top 10 cornbread spots, like they got to be killing it.
I'm surprised Cracker Barrel wasn't on the list.
I'm not.
All right, it's time for my best cornbread recipe. And before we start this recipe, I'm going to start with the story of the first time I was ever taught to make cornbread by my grandmother. Now, she taught me how to make a Southern style cornbread that I make for my family every time I make pinto beans. And I'm not going to share that recipe with you because it's not for everybody. It's kind of an acquired taste. You got to be a good old fashioned Southern boy to like Southern cornbread like that. But the one thing that she did teach me right off the bat was, I asked her, I said, okay, but what kind, how much of this do we need? How much of that do we need? She said, you don't measure things when you're making cornbread. You just do it by feel. So I'm not going to give you measurements. All right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you the ingredients that you're going to put in and the consistency you want at the end, and you figure it out. All right. So to start, you're going to take a cast iron skillet of some sort, put some bacon grease in it, put it in your oven, about 375 degrees. Okay. I've got a large one at my house that's like a baking pan style, almost like a rectangle cobbler style that I use, that I like a lot. Traditionally in the South, you use a round one. Now, this is a Northern style recipe with some Southern twist to it. Traditionally, a Northern style recipe is going to be baked on a sheet pan, but we're not going to do that, okay? Because I love the crispy crust and the extra flavor that the hot cast iron is going to give you. And you want that pan to sit in there for at least 30 minutes to come up to temp. So I'll throw my pan in there. I'll probably take a walk for 15 minutes, go do something, come back.
Do you heat up your pan separately and then put the bacon grease in, or are you heating up the bacon grease the whole time?
It's a good idea to put in your bacon grease right before you put in your cornmeal, actually. It's not going to kill it to put it in to start, but it's not going to take the bacon grease very long to get hot, and you want to spend as little time as possible moving hot oil around in your home kitchen, especially for home cooks. You don't want to spill that on yourself. Bacon grease has a really high smoke point, though, so at 350, you're probably not going to turn it into cancer stuff, but or ruin the flavor of it. But if you had olive oil, that'd be a terrible idea. So I'm going to do a 50-50 blend of self-rising cornmeal and self-rising flour. Okay. And you want this to be volume-wise about 50% of the cornbread you're going to make. It's going to be about 50% dry, 50% wet. Now, this has baking soda and baking powder already in it in the correct proportions. If you're going to use all-purpose flour and some rustic cornmeal that you got, you're going to have to put in some baking soda and baking powder. I would just Google, what the proportions are going to be on that. That's one that you're actually going to want to measure, but in the South, we use self-rising. Okay.
Thanks, Chef Google.
Another trick you can do is you can find yourself a good Jiffy brand. I'm not going to give the shout out, but there's a local food purveyor here that has a store here. They have a very good brand of cornbread muffin mix that's a Northern style that I like. What you want in your mix is you want something that's a mix of cornmeal and flour, because that flour is going to give it more of a cake-like texture. And if you get a pre-made mix, it's already probably going to come with sugar in it, so be aware of that. As for my wet ingredients, I'm going to add eggs, a decent amount of eggs. Okay, for a 8 by 13 pan, I'm probably going to put in 6 eggs. Okay, I'm gonna have a lot of eggs in there. I want it to really hold together. It's gonna be a nice, fluffy, cakey mix, and not only is the egg yolk gonna add a lot of savoriness, but that egg white is gonna help bind all the ingredients together so it doesn't fall apart when I try to cut it hot.
Yeah, holding together is very important. Like one of the most frustrating things for me with cornbread is trying to just tear off a hunk of it and it turns into crumbles. Like
Yep.
that can have its place, but I want something. I want a
If it's
thick
not in
boy.
a bowl of beans, I don't want it crumbled. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Or a glass
yeah.
of buttermilk. I don't want it crumbled. Okay. Next, I'm gonna add some honey. You can add sugar if you want. I like to add honey. It's a more natural ingredient. Uh, and it has a special kind of flavor to it, right? I mean, honey and sugar, they taste different, right? Honey has I don't know what you would describe it. I want to say umami, but that's probably not right. But it's got a little something to it that the sugar doesn't have, right? It brings something extra to the table. And now we're gonna get into our fats. I'm gonna add some sour cream, gives it a little wang. Probably a little buttermilk as well. You can go all buttermilk or all sour cream. I like to
Give it a
mix
little
the two.
wang. I heard of using yogurt as well.
That's fine. I think
Yeah,
that's fine. What you want is some sort of dairy that has a high fat content. And
yeah.
buttermilk and sour cream are both gonna have a little something to it. A little plain yogurt will be the same. Um, Plain yogurt's probably gonna be a little less fat than a sour cream, but that's okay. You know, if you want a low fat cornbread, I'm not gonna bust your chops on it. And then I like to add a little bit of oil. I don't want to go crazy with the oil. I'm probably just going to use standard canola oil. But that's when people think moistness, they think, oh, I need to add water. Wrong. You
Mm-mm.
need to add oil. Oil is the
Water
moistness.
evaporates.
Yeah.
Fat
Yep.
does not.
The fat is the moistness that you're taking. And we talked about this on the burger episode last week. When somebody has a moist, juicy burger, what's making it moist and juicy is the fat that you didn't smash out of it. Okay. And it's the same way with the cornbread. If I have a choice between adding water or oil to thin it out a little bit, I'm going oil 100% of the time. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Because the oil is going to make it very creamy and moist. And then we're going to get to the fun ingredients because I like to jazz my food up. I don't know about you guys, but I love just a standard cornbread, but I'm
You're
going to make
playing
mine
jazz, buddy.
special. I'm going to make mine special. I'm going to make mine where people say, man, I've never had cornbread like this. This is something that I learned at one of the restaurants I've worked at in my lifetime. Creamed corn is an excellent addition to any cornbread that you make.
Hell
It's
yeah!
gonna
Shout out JJ throwing it out there already.
uh, cheddar cheese. A nice finely shredded cheddar cheese in there is gonna add a little more fat, and it's gonna add
Mhm.
a little more savoriness. Pickled jalapenos, diced up real fine. Throw that in there, okay? Unless somebody's a baby and they can't handle spicy stuff. But no, throw that in there because it goes great with the jalapeno, and it goes really great with my next ingredient, which I never see people put in cornbread, but they really should. Chopped up bacon. Now, I don't wanna see you using bacon bits you bought from the store. I wanna see you pan fry some bacon, so you got your bacon grease for your pan, and now you're gonna take up that bacon, and you're gonna almost mush it, you know what I mean? Just to where you just got little flecks of bacon throughout it, and it's just
Oh
gonna
yeah. Oh
add
yeah.
a
Powderized.
really with that pickled jalapeno and that cheddar cheese is just gonna pop, right? And since we are adding 4 chunky ingredients, we're adding cream corn, we're adding cheddar, jalapeno, and bacon. You don't wanna go overboard on any of them. You wanna be you gotta realize that you want it to be 75% or more cornbread and 25% more of your little chunky ingredients. But at the end, we're gonna have a nice cakey cornbread that's gonna have little chunks of corn in it. It's gonna have little chunks of cheddar cheese in it. It's gonna have little chunks of jalapeno, little chunks of bacon, and it's gonna be delicious. Yeah, you can go pimento. I see you sledge it real good.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Pimento cheese cornbread. I'm in on that.
That's fine. I mean, that's the thing. That's the cool thing about it is it's a great medium to do a lot of different things. This is just my recipe if I want a showstopper, right? Somebody's gonna be like, man, I could just eat this as the whole meal. It's like, yes, you can, because you got a lot of protein in there. There's a there's a vegetable, right? A jalapeno is a vegetable, right? I think biologically it's a fruit, but culinarily it's a vegetable. So, uh,
God, looking at the chat, Will is having an existential crisis over here.
Will's out there in space with his plain Jane dry cornbread, and that's
He
fine.
found a way. He heard us talking. He found a way to communicate from the black hole because he just couldn't stand it.
He said, "No, cornbread is supposed to be dry, sans ingredients. You're gonna bake this in the oven. You know, I'll set a 20-minute timer and I'll come back and I'll check it, right? Because sometimes it's going to cook differently depending on the oven. Generally, it's going to take about 30 minutes to get done in a cast iron like that. The consistency that you're looking for, you want something batter-like, right? You want it. It's definitely going to grip a spoon, but if you pick up a spoonful and turn it to the side, most of it's going to fall off. There's going to be a nice thick coating around the spoon, but it's it's not hard to stir. Think
Talking
of
about like the Osec version of a batter.
Yeah, think of like the consistency of a good porridge or oatmeal. That's kind of what you want. You want it to be loose enough that you can pour it out of the bowl predominantly, but then at least 10 to 20% is still going to be stuck on the sides in a pretty thick coating because it's pretty thick, Yeah, come on, make my cornbread. It's gonna change your life, right? And then once it gets close to done, you can take a toothpick or a knife, table knife or something, stick it in the middle, pull it out. Once it's clean, you're done. Once you're getting close to done, what you want to look for is you want to look for brownness on the top, because hopefully your pan was preheated properly, so your bottom is really nice and brown. If it's not brown on the top, you can turn your broiler on a little bit. And if once you're brown on top, one thing I like to do is throw a little extra cheddar cheese over the top, a little extra of that chopped up jalapeno, and kind of broil that just a little bit to kind of give it a nice little cheesy jalapeno crust. Cheesy jalapeno.
It's the most Italian we've ever been.
Cornbread with beans is funny. JJ's talking about it. He said it has to be thick. It's such a funny thing in the South, because as a Southern boy who was raised in the time of it's like Southern the opulence of America, and like we have life so easy now. I love it, right? Because it's like, oh man, it reminds me of my childhood. I love beans and cornbread. My dad, on the other hand, who was raised in a family that lived like they were poor, you know what I mean? And that's mostly what they ate. He would not. He's like, I don't want beans and cornbread. I ate that my whole life. No. It's funny how it's for, at least for my family, it's changed. My sister and I, we love beans and cornbread. And my dad was always like, no, that was like 5 meals a week at my house when I was a kid. No, I don't want it.
Either it has a place in your heart or enough is enough.
He wanted steak and asparagus and all the stuff that he could never have as a kid. You know what I mean? Like, it's funny. I was raised in the the world where it's like, oh, you can buy steaks pretty cheap at the grocery store. So.
Well, now that you've got your glorious cornbread recipe, I wanted to throw out a few uses for cornbread. So obviously, it can go with your beans, it can be a side dish, it can be the main event. But there's some fun stuff. Pretty simple. I'm not breaking any real barriers here, but fun things you can do. Make that delicious cornbread. Let that sit out for a day and make yourself some croutons. There's nothing more fun than a cornbread crouton, especially with the bacon and jalapeno. Make yourself a little Caesar salad, put some cornbread croutons on there,
and
then
Will's
you've got a
dry
nice little
corn
sweet treat.
Yeah, Will's dry cornbread recipe would be perfect for making a cornbread recipe, cornbread crouton.
If it's already dry,
he hates that he
dry
can't
it out.
defend himself. He's staring me down right now. I can.
I also love I love just a cornbread crumble. Same idea as a crouton. Just take that whole cornbread, bake it, have your way with it, enjoy it. Then your leftovers, crumble it up in your hands and throw it into the oven at a low heat so it dries out. So then you've got a product that one can be shelf stable, so you can keep it around, and you can just sprinkle a little cornbread dust on some stuff for a fun texture, a little sweetness from the corn, a little savory from your recipe. It's basically a condiment at that point.
Yeah, Desiree Delight says greens and cornbread sandwich. I do love the idea of cornbread, especially like a hoe cake style, as like a sandwich encompassing bread. I like the idea of maybe some brisket and some turnip greens in between there, a little barbecue sauce on there. I would eat
Oh
that.
yeah, watch me putting just collard greens and mayonnaise on a cornbread sandwich. That's gonna be in my future. So sorry, everyone. Sorry, mom. Sorry, dad. This is how I go.
You can have the pot liquor from the greens in a bowl as like the dipping jus, like a French dip.
Oh God. Okay. All
We're
right.
gonna start a food truck, and this is all we're gonna sell, and we're gonna
Yeah, I gotta write that down.
we're gonna live on the beach in Pensacola, and we're just gonna sell these, and that's it.
I'm starting a competitor. I don't want to live in Pensacola.
You gotta enjoy it before it falls off into the ocean, right?
Yeah, I think Will's got an idea for the pop up that we will inevitably end up doing.
Yeah, Will Gray says country ham, greens, cornbread, French dip with pot liquor au jus. I like it. I like it. My one question about this though is the country ham going to be tender enough to really bite into it?
I
What are you
think
gonna
so. I
What are
think
you
it
gonna
would
do?
be. I mean, if I was doing that, I would shave it super thin. Like if you were gonna do just a raw country ham tasting, shave it and then saute it up just like you would roast beef. You know, get don't get it crispy, but get it cooked and get it soft so it could fall onto the sandwich. And oh man,
My father-in-law taught me this thing that people in the South is apparently an old Southern tradition for people who needed less sodium in their country ham, and this might work really well with this. You take a whole country ham, take a big pot, bring it to a boil, put the lid on it, wrap it up in blankets, and leave it sitting on your counter for like 12 to 14 hours minimum, maybe even 24 hours. And then you pull it out, and it's been slow cooking in that juice, and that juice has sucked out a lot of the sodium. But the texture of it was like a pulled pork, right? Because it just fell apart. But it had that country
yeah,
ham.
yeah,
It
yeah.
had that country ham flavor. So we could put that between two hoe cakes with the greens. We need one more. We need like a is
We need
barbecue
Duke's
sauce the
mayonnaise is what we need.
yeah, we do need some mayo. A pinto bean infused mayo.
I
That's too much. That's too much.
everybody couldn't see Will stream off of the storm off of the stream, but I'm not gonna lie, man. I'm kind of with him. I'm not boiling country ham. I'll boil a ham bone, but I'm not boiling the ham.
Well, I tell you what, when my father-in-law told me that's what we were doing, I said, I don't know about this. In my head, I was like, I don't know. But after I had it, I was like, this is some of the best country ham I've ever had. Now he did get a very high quality ham. But it was like, the thing with country ham is you need almost a steak knife to eat it a lot of the times. You know what I mean? And this was like a pulled barbecue type of consistency. I mean, it just melted when you put it in your mouth, and it was so different for me. And I thought I was just thinking that it might work well as for a sandwich. What about I was thinking about the pinto bean infused mayo. It's just kind of a joke, but you could do like a cumin infused mayo that might be pretty good.
Oh yeah, I'm still
Something like
stuck
that.
on pimento cheese cornbread. I'm gonna have to do that.
Yeah, I'm in. Why not? I mean,
Right, right down.
how
That'd
about
be
just
real
a
good. We got to knock this out.
pimento cheese and bacon BLT between two hoe cakes? Yeah, pimento cheese, nice juicy Cherokee purple tomato or pink brandywine or whatever your favorite summer tomato is. Piece of lettuce, some nice high quality bacon, and some cornbread. It sounds fantastic, doesn't it?
Our cornbread discussion has devolved into just sandwiches that we want to eat right now.
This is it though. This is life, man. I mean, hey, how much time do you spend as a chef just sitting on the line when you're slow and like talking about stuff like this though? This is the life of being a cook, is coming up with what you're gonna cook next, and
Oh yeah.
being creative is part of the fun of cooking as you become a better cook. When you start out, it's really important to follow recipes, but then as you learn techniques, it's really important in my mind to start being creative and coming up with your own ideas, because that's where the joy comes from. Thank you,
We're having a
Desiree.
lot of fun in the shop right now. It's new menu rollout season. So we're doing our seasonal updates and everything. And there's no more fun time to be in a professional kitchen than new menu time, because everyone is at their most creative, their most passionate, and we're all bouncing ideas off of each other, trying each other's food, and it's very fun. It's a real good breakup from the 9 to 5 regular nature of it, and to all of a sudden, oh, everyone is amped on these ideas and amped on each other's ideas. It's a fun time
Yeah,
to be in the kitchen.
you start out every new menu with, dude, you got to try my new pot roast recipe, right? You got to try
Yeah,
this new veal osso buco that I've been toying with, and by the end, and then whether it's a month or 3 months later, however long your menu lasts, it's I'm so tired of making this pot roast. Can we please do something else? And
yeah,
it's just
yeah, yeah.
it's so funny how the energy changes, because like you said, like when it's new menu creation time, the energy is palpable in the kitchen. Like everybody's so excited to be there and to have their ideas valued. And by the end of the menu, everybody's like, I'm so tired of making tomato crab stacks. This is the worst,
Oh yeah. Like the dish right now that comes to mind is again, not I'm not going to shout out the restaurant or throw the chef under the bus. I'm positive he doesn't watch, but whatever. He made an amazing sweet potato pate for our menu. It's a sweet potato and chickpea with a house made harissa topped with candied pumpkin seeds. No, I'm sorry, candied pepitas, candied orange peel, and burrata, and you mix it all up at the table, and it's sweet and spicy and smooth. But man, 2 weeks in, when we realized how much we had to put into making the pate, it's just time consuming to smooth it out and pass it through a chinois, and like it, oh my god, like we were so upset about the prep about 2 weeks later, but god, is it a tasty dish.
I mean, it sounds great. I really love burrata as well. It's such an underappreciated ingredient. Um, a lot of people go the fresh mozzarella route, but it like takes it another step there. So we've come to the end of our show. I think this is what we've got on cornbread. It's a incredibly divisive product. I mean, people
Sorry.
literally.
I had to shout it out. Kev finally showed up. He knows. He said, "Damn that pate." he knows what it is.
Oh yeah, no, I should have said pate, because that's the worst thing to make. It's so much, like it just takes so long and so much attention. Like you just cannot, if you ever cook it, you're toast, right? Or I'm thinking of the terrine I used to make, but I don't know. There's always that one item on every menu. But yeah, I think we've done what we can on cornbread. It's such a divisive product, such a divisive food. Yet at the same time, it always brings together the meal, and uh, such a big thing in the South and even in the North. And it's like I said, as American as apple pie, as American as cornbread, as American as corn, because really that is cornbread and corn are the American ingredients, and the American bread. If there's an American bread, it's cornbread. So, like we say every week, show us your dirt. Twitter at the Dirty Belly. If you want to send us pictures of your food, what you're making. If you make my cornbread, send me a picture of it. Tell me how it turns out. Tell me why I should give you measurements on your ingredients next time. Um, Instagram at the Dirty Belly Show. Facebook, the Dirty Belly Show.
Yeah, hit us up. Show me them bellies, y'all. I haven't
Yeah,
got one belly
please don't
pic.
contact us on Twitter. Do Instagram. Instagram's better. Shout outs, tea and hot takes, 8 p.m. Tuesday, and trivia night featuring somebody, 8 p.m. Thursday. Coming up.
Coming all the way up, baby.
Nerdy news too at some point. Thursdays at 3 or 4 or something like that. If you're watching us on Twitch, just look at the schedule, man. Look down at the schedule. See when the other shows are coming on. Watch another show. Do it. All this stuff's on Rivet City Radio. You love it. We got such a great intro. And here's our outro. Thank you, Hungry Homies, for joining us today on our journey of learning more about the food we eat. Peace out, y'all.
Love you.
Y'all just wait. I'm coming back.